That the program has no fees or anything, it's all totally free, is fantastic.
Yo creo que si conozco a alguien que está próxima a ser mamá, lo primero que haría sería recomendarle el programa porque te entrega mucho apoyo, mucha información y más que nada como apoyo emocional, una guía, te da una visión diferente de cómo es ser papá aquí, quizás en este país.
Y así pues es un bonito programa, porque pues es buena persona la señora y los ha atendido muy bien.
Pensé que nada más iba a ser un programa de orientación quizás para los nuevos padres, pero creo que nos llevamos una linda sorpresa porque Gaby es una persona muy cercana a nosotros, es como parte de nuestra familia, siempre ha estado dispuesta a ayudarnos y a escucharnos con nuestras dudas sobre la paternidad y en nuestro caso que estamos solos en este país ha sido como de mucha ayuda.
Es un gran apoyo para nuevos padres y más aún si están en nuestra situación, que somos extranjeros, que nuestra familia y amigos, como dice Carla, están en otro país, lejos. Entonces sí, viene muy bien el programa para apoyarse tanto emocional y como anímicamente y bueno, en varios aspectos del programa que nos ayuda a seguir adelante con esta nueva aventura.
Te ayuda como a ver los distintos recursos que tiene la comunidad para nuevos papás, entonces creo que es de gran ayuda.
No queda mucho que agregar, pero lo veo de la misma forma.
Que hemos aprendido algunas cosas aquí y pues los han ayudado, como este programa los ha ayudado para seguir creciendo a la bebé, como con buenos consejos y así.
Sí, y creo que también ha sido muy importante el tema de apoyarnos con el libro y saber qué actividades hacer con Máximo de acuerdo a su edad, cómo estimularlo, cómo cuidarlo de los peligros de la casa, como cosas que uno como papá nuevo no conoce, claro.
Pues a mí me gustaría que lo siguiéramos visitando aquí en la biblioteca de Covelo. Está tranquilo y muy bonito aquí.
Cuando no nos podemos reunir, nos comunicamos por Zoom o una llamada telefónica o por texto.
Donde nos visite porque ha sido nuestra casa, a veces nosotros vamos a Willits y puede ser en el parque. Gaby llega, hacemos un resumen de cómo ha ido nuestra semana o qué hemos hecho de nuevo, cómo va el trabajo. Luego hacemos las actividades del libro, vemos si podemos hacer un juguetito nuevo para Máximo, a veces ella lo evalúa, cómo está su sentido motriz, qué ha aprendido de nuevo, nuevas palabras.
Call the meeting to order at 9 a.m. on August 28th, 2023. Could you do a roll call, please?
Supervisor Mulhern? Here. Chair Hashak?
Here. And I'm going to have Scott Ward lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so welcome everyone to the General Government Committee. I'd just like to note a couple things before we get going, is that there was a letter from the Department of Cannabis Control that's in the e-comments, and so it's certainly worth looking at, and appreciate their communication with Mendocino County's Department of Cannabis Department. And let's see, we also, one of the things we need to do today is set a date for the second round of revisions to the ordinance. So I guess there was a preliminary meeting last week, and we were going to set a date for sometime in mid-September. So I guess that at some point we'll do that today. And I'm going to look to or Supervisor Mulherin, do you have anything?
No, not at this time.
Okay, so I'll look to the department, and Sarah McBurney, do you have any comments or anything you want to note about the report and all?
Absolutely. Good morning, chairs, supervisors, county council. Steve Dunicliffe, interim director for Cannabis Department, community members. Thank you all for coming. Sarah McBurney with the Mendocino County Cannabis Department, senior program manager. We have presented our monthly report. We also have a recap of the MCA memo. Is it direction of the board to review either of those?
What was that last thing? I didn't catch that last
We are
one.
prepared to do a high-level overview of either the report or the MCA memo. What would you like us to do?
Okay, yeah, if you could go, the MCA memo had some questions about the report, so maybe that would be more useful to just deal with those directly.
Sounds great. So our total applications processed for the month of July was 9. We have our phase 3 updates, 19 total, with 4 issued year to date. Our renewals update, we had several that were identified last month as being able to move quick. I think it's important to note that in total we have 81 applications waiting on applicant response and 49 waiting on CDFW response. For the department, we are still working on our Gantt chart, which will show our move forward process, and we'll be able to identify on track. For the CDFW screening tool update, we do have a meeting on 9/5 with everyone, and we'll be able to provide more updates after that meeting.
Okay, who is invited to that meeting?
Senior planner for Cannabis Department, Matt Goins. At the moment, it's County Council, myself, I believe Sarah McBurney, and Steve Dunicliffe. I think that's all that's invited at the moment.
Oh, for the screening tool?
Yes,
So doesn't CDFW have to be involved in that?
and
or-
CDFW.
Okay,
Sorry, I thought that was, yeah.
okay, yeah. And then with the Gantt chart you referred to, that with the number being 25 hours, we're thinking that that's the time it will take to review. That's going to have an effect on the Gantt chart. So are we looking like we're going to be ahead of schedule? Are we going to be using all of the outside planners with that kind of new information? How's it look?
Yeah, absolutely. So 25 hours is the current time study for new applications. We are going to continue to conduct time studies and be able to update as needed, but last month's study showed 25 hours as the number, and that's the average, of course, so some take longer and some can be sooner than that. But yes, it looks like we're on track currently compared to previous projections, and we are excited to continue to introduce or re-evaluate time studies too as needed and as the streamlining process takes more impact. So for now, we are looking like we are on track, and we'll continue to update as needed.
Okay, thank you.
And then just continuation of the report. So training materials has been a big subject for everyone. So we're excited that we have some new ones published on the website, both internal internal training materials for our staff as well as how-tos for Excella that have been created by LACO. So that partnership is going well. For the LJAGP, we are going to start doing our program manual, which will help with the distribution of the $4.8 million in direct grants. And going on to LEAP. So currently where we are with LEAP, we have completed with we've identified the direct grant funds. We have our local eligibility in partnership with GoBiz the 5-mile camp radius was called into question. So while GOBA's initially accepted our eligibility criteria, the 5-mile camp radius has now come into question. So we're looking to share how that impacts the individual community members as opposed to the community as a whole with GOBAs. So to move forward with that, we need to identify that and refer back to GOBAs. With LEAP, we want to share that we're the first county to have all of our audit materials turned back into the state for our LEAP routine audit, so that was a good win, thank you. And in addition to that, I did want to share that throughout the waiver process, we did not have any denied, which was also a huge win, so that was good. So all of our local equity verified waivers that were accepted, none were denied. Our move is happening now, so we will be live in Ukiah as of this Friday. We're excited for continuation of resource sharing and being able to continue to collaborate with both PBS and E&H, making a seamless transition. I think that the site inspections that have been conducted this last month are a great example of our resource sharing that we've already endeavored on, so looking more forward to that as well. And then lastly, for our ordinance streamlining meeting, we had the meeting. We are looking for a direction from the board of where we want to either streamline the permitting process or renewing cannabis regulation. And then once we've identified that, what's the schedule for those meetings moving forward?
Okay. Okay. With the LJAGP grant, there was a question about, now that the audit's over and when we think that the direct grants might be, we have a process for that. Do we
For
have
the
an idea?
LJAGP?
Yeah.
Thank you. So we're currently in developing the program manual stages. So we need to get that developed with the help of the state and community member input. And then once we get that program manual dialed in, we'll be able to start that program back up and issue the direct grants.
And we still think that there will be about 4.1 million for direct grants. Is that the number?
Yeah, I believe the number was 4.8.
4.8. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Dunicliffe.
Thank you. If I may, we've also, the department has had discussions about letting an RFP to procure contract assistance for operating the program. That's what was done, certainly with the first round of LEAP funding, and based on current staffing levels for a short-term workload spike, it seems to be an efficient way to utilize resources.
Okay. All right. So with the date for the changes to the ordinance, do you want to try to set a date at this point?
If that is in line with the board, absolutely.
Mr. Chair, if I could talk a little bit in terms of just my own office's role and what might be sort of helpful in terms of timeline and process. I think that I had suggested, actually when we were going through the prior ordinance changes, that September would be a good time to start for any additional changes that may be appropriate. I think we're just about there now. We did have a meeting with members of the community to get some sort of initial input as to some areas that may be helpful in terms of ordinance changes coming up. What's going to happen is that there's likely going to be, going back, looking at the prior MCA suggestions, looking at what we've gotten so far, I think there's going to be a number of different items to sort of sort through and figure out which may be worth the time and effort at the moment, which are likely to be productive, and which are things that may not be. What I would suggest would be to have a little bit more process in terms of soliciting input as to areas of prospective change, then an opportunity for this committee to identify which ones it wants to focus on, and then an opportunity for my office to work on some drafting to get some language together to then take as a recommendation, or that this committee could approve as a recommendation to the board, but to first bring that back and have a little bit more of a vetting process in front of the committee before it goes forward to the board. I actually think that one of the things we learned from the last time around was that if we were able to take a little bit more time and go through that vetting process, I think it helps in terms of streamlining things on the back end, and it really does help identify some issues before we have the ordinance enacted, and things that may be a little bit easier in terms of administration. So, and I know I said a bit of a mouthful there, but I would suggest just roughly maybe at least one more meeting for soliciting some input or an opportunity range of time for some additional written input to come back to the committee, and then a time that the committee could meet to sort of discuss, with those suggestions sort of loosely grouped, which are the areas that the committee wants to pursue and which are ones that either it's not interested in for policy reasons or could wait till later.
Yeah, that sounds like a good approach, because it seems like the more communication we have beforehand in setting these things up, that the better the product is. Okay, so I hope that the community is in favor of that too, because it seems like if we can get these things worked out and on a lower scale, it helps. Okay. I guess I had another question for County Council, is that there was a meeting about the EIR with the state last week. I was wondering if you had anything to report from that.
You're talking about the scoping meeting I think that was the initial public input in terms of the scope of the EIR. I don't know that we have any details we particularly need to report, but I'm looking to Mr. Schwartz here to see if...
Deputy County Council Jared Schwartz. Yeah, that meeting was for public comment. There was no responses provided by the state. They did a brief introductory of the process, but then they just took input and provided no responses. I believe the responses would come at a later date, either inside the scoping tool or before.
Okay, so this is just one of their steps that they're going through, and hopefully that it was productive for them.
I hope so as well.
All right. Any further comments? Should we go to public comment?
Good morning, supervisors, county staff. Michael Katz, Executive Director for the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance. Appreciate the report. I want to go a little backwards from the topics. So related to the ordinance changes, while we were in the meeting, it was discussed that there were likely limited amount of resources that the county has time-wise to put towards this next round. There's obviously a lot of things going on, and it was identified that we would potentially be able to figure out exactly how much time the county has to be able to put towards these resources in terms of person hours or whatever. So I don't know if that's something that's still being discussed or, but it seems like that would be good information to have, or based on what was just said, it sounds like there's a good process figured out for us to engage in that conversation. We will be refining our list based on the need to prioritize based on the limited time and resources we have to engage in that process.
Yeah. Just for clarification, so my understanding is that we're going to have another meeting, we're going to prioritize, and then from that,
yes,
we'll be able to discern what is doable and what's not.
Absolutely, yeah. And in terms of focusing, conversations have been had around focusing on items that will really streamline the issuance of the CCBLs, first and foremost, and then trying to find as many items that will be low resource intensive but high benefit to the community and the department. So we will continue to refine our list with those things in mind.
Okay.
As far as the LJAGP program manual, really glad to hear that process is going to be underway. Really encourage inviting a meeting with stakeholders, because we have a bunch of ideas that were not included in the previous manual that would benefit the entire program. When it comes to the LEAP program, we have submitted this morning, I submitted yesterday, and then again this morning, because it didn't look like it came in through the Granicus, our recommendations for how to approach the next round of equity application. There were a lot of comments that came back from GoBiz about deficiencies in many of our answers, and we've identified ways to address those information that could be provided. So we're happy to engage with the department on that as the application is developed. Glad to hear about the new items being added to the website. It could be helpful for a can of notes to let people know, like, here are the new items that are on the website. The new inspection form is up there. I know there's some other things, so keeping people informed as that those positive updates are made. And as far as the annuals, seeing there's a difference between the annuals issued month to month over the last couple of monthly reports. Just curious as to that mechanism. Is that the administrative permits, or is there some other mechanism that the county is employing to issue those annuals? Curious about that. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's all I have for now. I look forward to your responses and continuing engagement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, one last thing, sorry. Staffing. Notice there's a lot of positions that are unfilled. Wondering if there is an attempt being made to recruit for those, or how that aligns with current budget issues, or just kind of staffing update. Thank you.
Okay. So before you get going, let's turn to the department to see if there's any response to, like, the question about the annuals or any of the other issues that were just brought up that need to be addressed.
Senior Cannabis Planner Matt Goins. I don't really have a comment in a moment for the annual comment that Mr. Katz made. I don't really have an update for him particularly. He said a lot, and I don't remember exactly what the question was, so, but.
There's an increase in annuals that have been noted in the reports, and so just wondering how those annuals are being issued.
You mean through the state?
Yes.
Through the state.
Right, so is that an application that's been submitted to the county that the county provides to the state and says this is now eligible for an annual because something has been reviewed?
That's typically how it goes, but sometimes an AP will, so an AP can move it through a different process, because they can go through, do their determination through that, and they can kind of, I don't want to say bypass, but they sort of move forward with an administrative permit versus through us.
Right, so that's what I was, I guess, wondering, just to confirm that that is the process that is leading to these annuals as opposed to something else.
We still leave comment, though, for an administrative permit. The Planning and Building Services reaches out to us and says, please comment on this and see that it's okay to move forward. We say yes or no, depending on what it is, and then they move on with theirs, and it goes on to the state.
Okay. And then the other part was the staffing, and we're feeling all right with where the staffing is right now?
So in regards to our staffing, I think that in terms of bodies or staffing bodies, the way we can look at it is we're implementing more of our resource sharing as we're coming into Ukiah. I am happy to share that we are pursuing a promotional opportunity as well as a permitting technician for the department as well. So, you know, when it comes to staffing, I think that we have two kind of approaches that we're looking into it. And at this time, I would say that we are feeling pretty good with where we are. I will defer to our interim director, Steve Dunnicliffe, if he has any more to add, or if...
Steve Dunnicliffe, I was typing notes, so I didn't catch the entirety of the update, but with his staffing, a couple of points that we've been emphasizing. The partnerships that we've been creating with planning and building. We also do have we're pursuing right now a position for a planning tech to help with some of the workload that our planners are creating. We're also pursuing a planner promotional opportunity within the department.
Okay. And the move to Ukiah will be on September 1st?
That is correct.
Okay.
This Friday.
All right. Mr. Ward.
Good morning, board members, staff, county council. I'd like to start off by praising Brian Webb, who's a code enforcement officer, who has been doing cannabis inspections and has been doing an outstanding job. Of all my building permit clients that Brian has been out on the site, nothing but high praises. And so kudos to John for training Brian. Kudos to Cannabis for grabbing him in the do it. Thank you for the simplified inspection checklist. That makes a lot of sense, makes Brian's job easy, makes my job easy, getting job sites ready for inspection. I would suggest that maybe you follow the building inspector's model for scheduling inspections, say in the north area, certain days, and, you know, Leggett and Laytonville and Willett's all in one day, and then Covelo, usually pretty slim. But you might get more done rather than having the inspector ping-ponging across the county, spending more ineffective hours driving. You can cluster those inspections in certain areas. I've been dealing with two different four-leaf planners. One of them has been outstanding, one not so much. One of them asked me for contiguous expansion information for a client, which was relocation. Two completely diametrically opposed animals. And I explained it to him, and he figured it out. But he should have it figured out before he asked me for stuff that's not applicable. And I can give you the name of that four-leaf planner if you'd like later. Another one that's kind of a pet peeve of mine, I'd like to see it because it bothers me, and I'm petulant in that way. You should take the former director's name off your Cannabis Department letterhead. You really should. Just leave it blank, don't put anything on it, but take her name off of it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ward. So, yeah, kudos to Brian Webb for the work that he's doing.
Good morning, Corinne Powell, cultivator, longtime license holder until recently, and I have a problem with my expired license, and I thought there might be an opportunity at the beginning of the meeting for non-agendized items, although we didn't have public comment for that, so I apologize for bringing it forward in my time now. However, on the 11th of August, I sent an email with documentation regarding...
Corinne?
Yes.
The public expression for items not on the agenda is at the end.
Oh! Well,
So,
then I'll come back.
if you want to come back, great.
Yeah, that's fine, I will.
Okay.
And in regards to the agendized item, I want to say that I think this staff has been extraordinary, and I appreciate all that you're bringing to the table and your many accomplishments. For purposes of the report, I am a wholehearted supporter of the items brought up by MCA, and I hope you will address them individually. Thank you. I'll be
Okay.
back.
Thank you. Thank you, staff. Honeymoon continues.
Good morning, Hannah Nelson, and I'll just praise everybody. Also, I think particularly echoing Scott's comment about Brian, not only is he individually doing a great job, it was a fantastic use of resource sharing. So I think that's an excellent example of how this team is looking to maximize efficiencies, and that's important, and we really appreciate it. I also echo some of the scheduling issues in terms of mapping things out, but also certainly I understand that Brian was just starting his gig, and so it might have been like just quickly reaching out to people, but a few people were felt bad that he was calling them at 8 o'clock in the morning to come that day or the next morning, and they weren't available. And just to emphasize that that's no reflection on their willingness or ability, and that reaching out and scheduling things for these tiny little businesses that are trying to cover everything is a great use of resource for everybody. Also want to, on the congratulatory end, congratulate you on the audit materials getting in and such an excellent high mark in terms of the issues that needed to be dealt with. As a reminder, before the LJGAP grant gets going, and I'd be curious about whether there were specific issues identified in the prior manual that need to be changed or updated, and that would be great for us to have a conversation about. But before that program, the grant program, the direct grant program, or even fee waivers, can begin to flow under that particular grant, it is super important, and I feel like a broken record, but to restart the LEAP eligibility, because LEAP verified applicants get priority under LJGAP. And so it would be a disservice to not have this long period of time of processing eligibility. And there, I'm including an amount of time prior to the actual official halt of it. There was a period of time of, let's just call chaos, where a lot of verifications were not being handled correctly and files lost and other things. So I think that as a practical reality, I know I have clients who have been waiting more than a year. They had submitted their materials and just, it's been hanging out there. So it would be unfortunate, particularly because some of the LJGAP resources had to be redirected, understandably, for the EIR and whatnot. Anyway, that's my plea once again. With respect to the forthcoming amendments, unfortunately, I wasn't able to be at the original scoping or input session. However, I have had a preliminary discussion with County Counsel's office and really appreciate that. Look forward to further dialogue. I think to Michael's point, it would be helpful to have, while it's an interactive process, to have some idea of what the scope or ability of issues, number of issues to prioritize. I fully appreciate the insinuation, Supervisor Hashtag, that it kind of depends on the issue and how meaty the issue is and whether or not it will take more time. But if we can have some relevant idea, that would help us in terms of matching the expectations. And another thing that I've said many times is the immediate kind of advanced scheduling so that there is a meaningful participation and ability to plan. And particularly, I want to remind everybody that we're about going into harvest time. And so I think that it is really a good idea that if we can nail down some of those dates today for another input session, I completely concur with County Council that having that process up front is helpful and important. Look forward to some of the back and forth also with the department, maybe outside of these meetings, just to get an idea of whether some of the suggested amendments are practical and focused, and having that high impact, low resource nexus. One more praise is for Cananotes and the uptick in Cananotes. It's really appreciated. I know it takes effort and getting that information out. And then technology, thank you for doing DocuSign. And that is something that I don't know if it was in the report, I don't know if I saw it there, but the supervisors should know that the effort was put in to allow people to do DocuSign. And in our remote county, that's a huge thing and an efficiency, I think, for everybody, and will help our planet in terms of travel time and whatnot. So kudos for those things. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So just with the LEAP eligibility, is there a plan to, what is the plan?
Sarah McBurney, Senior Program Manager, Mendocino County Cannabis Department. Currently with LEAP eligibility, our eligibility criteria has come into question with GOBIZ. So we need to come up with a response to the question of the 5 mile camp criteria. We cannot move forward with processing until we have the eligibility dialed in.
And then there's another question about eligibility, about if a person has the incident, or bust in another county or jurisdiction, then are they eligible in Mendocino County? And I guess county council was looking at that, but
And, sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't know that we have an answer at that time. That's something we may have to get back to the committee with.
okay, so it's still being reviewed? Okay, thank you. And then just with the communication, I really appreciate the increased Canon notes and just on all sides, the communication is the key. And I think that when we have more communication, timely communication, and people know what's going on, and that the department knows what's going on from the stakeholders too, it just makes for better results. And I think that we're all feeling like when there is that communication, things work better. And I certainly see that happening in the last 6 months. So thank you. Ms. Nelson.
Thank you. Just real quickly, with respect to the LEAP eligibility issues, it would be excellent if we could maybe set some times to work on this and get a schedule going. And with respect to the issue as to whether buses from other areas work or not, I can tell you that the state in its own equity program allows for arrests and convictions in any, and even out of state, to be eligible for the state fee waiver program. So.
Right, and I think that's being taken into consideration.
And definitely, I am going to continue the drumbeat that I started a long time ago, which is that convincing the state that rural communities are different than urban areas, and that the raids did not always result in arrests or convictions, is critical, and that there are other ways to prove impact both to the larger community as well as to the individuals. Thank you.
Ms. Powell.
Non-agendized items.
No, not yet.
Eligibility. Discussion?
We're talking about LEAP eligibility, yes.
So, okay. In that context, I think I can speak at this time. And I apologize for my eagerness to get this before you. I am one of those people who was denied eligibility because my encounters with the war on drugs were not in Mendocino County. And I brought up this question to former Director Nevedal a long time ago, and she said, no, you would not be eligible. At that point, I contacted the Department of Cannabis Control. They said they had no restriction on location for eligibility. In January, the state granted me eligibility, which I used the waiver upon filing March 1st as payment for my renewal. It had been until about August 10th from March 1st before I had any communication that my renewal was being reviewed. Upon receiving the department's notice, I was told that my waiver was not allowed, and therefore I needed to come in and pay my $733 renewal fee. The next day, I submitted an email to all these staff members and you two committee supervisors with my disagreement and therefore my appeal for eligibility. And I brought into question the county's listed eligibility criteria on its website for LEAP. And in that eligibility, it states that if a licensee in Mendocino County had been in operation without concern licensed X period of time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that they were they were eligible for LEAP. It's item number 3. It's resolution adopted by the Board of Supervisors July 29th of last year. And it should be the gold standard if it is listed on our cannabis website as eligibility. Required a conviction, which I also attached to that email. I put in the resolution. It's 20-134. That should help County Council find it easily. And I'm hoping that with all the people in this room who might opine on this subject, that we can have some kind of discussion as to whether I should pursue this, whether I'm on the hook for waiver support that has been granted many others. That is my plea. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Powell. You know, like we said earlier, County Council is reviewing it, and so hopefully there'll be a decision soon, or, right?
I would expect relatively soon we'd be able to address the issue. Ms. Powell's own situation may have some additional complications that may need to be addressed as well. So my understanding is there isn't actually an application in that case, and we may need to look at whether or not the committee or the board is choosing to reopen eligibility periods.
Okay. All right. Okay, online.
Michelle Schott.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, Michelle. Go ahead.
I'm live. Okay, there you go. So I'm really curious about this. I understand the state's concern with this 5-mile radius thing for the eligibility, and I also found it somewhat odd. But however, I can only speak to Laytonville, and I would be curious to know what their concerns are, because 5 miles in an urban area is really different than 5 miles in a rural area. In Laytonville, I was a school counselor, and I can tell you that the trauma from all these raids was deep and wide. And they had helicopters flying over the elementary school full of marijuana. They had, what do you call them? You know, truck after truck after truck, whatever you call it, like a motorcade full of pickup trucks, full of marijuana, driving down Highway 101, which in Laytonville is, you know, right by the elementary school, right by the high school. And people were pretty terrorized in general here. So I don't know what kind of information they want you to collect about that, but, you know, helicopters flying over your house, and, you know, I'm not quite sure what to do, but I'm certainly happy to help collect some data if that's what they need about how damaging all of that was for people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Monique Ramirez and then Paul Hansberry.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Monique Ramirez, District 3. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate everybody's work overall for just making our program better. It's been so refreshing to see just all of the changes across the board. And I know a lot of times we cultivators come up, and not that we're complaining, but we do bring attention to things that are issues. And it feels like we've really turned a corner in these last couple months. And I just want to acknowledge everybody for making those positive changes. And it's just really important that, to me, that you guys know that I really care. And I know a lot of people in the community do as well, because you've heard those comments reiterated earlier this morning. And just like, you know, the fact that we have a mission statement now on documents is just really great. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I just want to speak to the LEAP eligibility and the, or actually not the eligibility, but the overall next round and the application that the county will be submitting. And as you know, I work with MCA, and I think it's great that we've been able to engage with you guys and give you some of our input to help make a better scorecard. And if we can, come together any other ways, happy to do so. And I think that one of the great things is because we have had funding from the previous rounds, we can use a lot of that data to help beef up the answers to the questions that they're asking for these future rounds. And so I think that will be really helpful. And I just hope that the MCA considerations to make our score better will be considered. And, as a community, we're always available to speak with you guys and help get us to where we need to be so we can be successful. So thank you so much. I appreciate everybody. And thanks for everyone's opportunity for me to be able to speak today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. Paul Hansberry.
Yes, good morning. To echo everyone else's appreciation for the work that's being done, both by the supervisors and the board, and well, just generally staff. I think that if we identified a independent equity program for the county, we might be able to move forward a little quicker with that rather than just relying on the state LEAP program. Whether they're dovetailed, I don't understand. Perhaps they already are, but it seems to me that the LEAP program is the only equity program that we have, and we don't have our own Mendocino County independent equity program that would give things independently of the GoBiz and state program. It seems to me, I don't understand why they're calling into question the 5 mile radius when we look at the DCC and their grant programs as far as equity. They're including entire zip codes, not just a 5 mile radius, but entire zip codes in areas that have been affected. So it's a funny way to. I just don't understand what they're using as criterion for eligibility, and the disparity between the two seems odd to me. So I'm glad I'm not the one that has to decide. But I just wanted to point out that the DCC is using zip codes and not just a 5 mile radius. So I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
And Mr. Hansberry?
Yes.
So some of those zip codes were in northern Mendocino County, weren't they?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, they were. And it's surprising that very few were in Humboldt County, and most of them included almost all of Mendocino County, northern Mendocino County.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that information.
Of course.
All right, next. That's all online. Okay, any further comments from the chamber?
Michael Katz, Executive Director for the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance. Just related to the LEAP things, conversations that I've had previously have indicated that a lot of the questions, and even in the reporting from the state, that there was a lack of understanding from them about the direct impact. Like the 5 mile radius is one component, but they still need to understand how any individual applying was directly impacted if they fall in that 5 mile radius, and that sort of thing can really be addressed with an affidavit of the operator explaining the direct impact to them as well. So that's one component, and we've included that in our recommendations, and happy to work with the department as soon as possible to provide responses to GoBiz so we can get this questions answered and move
Some kind of anecdotal approach.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's like there's,
Right.
we know that in a lot of these situations when there were raids that did not result in an arrest or conviction, there is not paperwork. Camp records are not subject to Public Records Act requests. So there's a lack of official documentation in a lot of these cases. And so an affidavit sworn under penalty of perjury for people identifying how they were directly impacted in conjunction with the 5 mile radius could address that issue. And we're happy to talk about the other issues that we can address as well.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Hannah Nelson, just briefly on the impact issue, I want to make sure that there's a separation of the two issues. One is the use of raids in general as opposed to arrest and conviction. And through a lot of litigation and special masters and testimony of communities, there are records in federal courts, and probably we can dig them up, regarding the horrors and the impacts of the military-style raids that occurred through camp. Then there's the issue of individual direct impact, and I think to Michael's point, because an individual may not be able to pull the record on the specific raid that occurred because the details of those records are not, camp lost a lot of records, and some of the public information is being, requests are being claimed to be under the law enforcement exception, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's difficult to nail down the raid that happened to you as opposed to raids in general and the impact in general. That there's a good record of, and in fact, the people who did our equity assessment originally have a lot of that material. I could probably dig up material that I have in my files from conducting the litigation about those raids. But in addition, I think that the individual claimant who's talking about their impact, that's where the direct declarations come in. And I just want to not merge those two issues, because it could be that during meetings with GoBiz, if that's not clearly understood, there might be a misdirect of what information to give them or what resources. Thank you.
Corinne Powell, forgive me for belaboring my point, but I just want to make it clear for the record that the eligibility criteria I referenced in Resolution 20-134 does have what I believe to be the applicable language pertaining to my situation, and to reinforce the fact that previous convictions, as reported to the state, were sufficient for them. My previous convictions 20 years ago would also create an eligibility. And in the resolution, the introductory paragraph on eligibility requires one of 5 categories. Category number 3, which I believe applies to me personally and is much less complicated than identifying an area of impact. Item number 3 states, any individual who has obtained or applied for a cannabis permit in Mendocino County, or who has worked in or currently works in the cannabis industry and was arrested and or convicted of a nonviolent cannabis-related offense or was subject to forfeiture, et cetera, et cetera. Just want to be sure that you're all aware of why I'm making this request for appeal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments online? No? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Michelle. Michelle
Hi.
Schott.
I just wanted, my last comment is, this is another place where we could try to align with the state, and that's my comment. And I also want to say that I really appreciate all the work you guys are doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, like you said, we are trying to align with the state as much as possible and use the maximum allowances that they provide. Okay? So, back to the committee. Any further comments?
I don't have any additional questions or comments at this time.
Okay, so will, any comments from staff? Seeing none? Okay, we'll look for approval of the item, the report.
Move approval, and also I believe to accept the report.
Yeah. Second. Okay.
Supervisor Hashak?
Yes.
Supervisor Mulhern?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, item 3A, approval of minutes for July 31st, 2023 regular meeting. Okay, any comments?
I have no comments and would move approval
Okay.
after public comment.
Okay, any public comment? Nothing online? Okay, back to the committee. Okay.
Move
so
approval of the minutes from the July 31st regular meeting?
I'll second.
Supervisor Mulhern?
Yes.
Supervisor Hashak?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, item 3B, public expression. I think we heard from Ms. Powell. Hopefully we got that issue taken care of.
Anna Nelson, just would like to please request that we schedule the public meeting for further input. And Michael and I were suggesting September 13th or sometime that week. Thank you.
All right.
Good morning, Michael Katz, Executive Director of the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance. I would just like to report back on a very successful event that we held at the Madrones and the Bohemian Chemist in Anderson Valley on August 20th. This was a celebration co-put together by Visit Mendocino County and MCA to celebrate our local state fair cannabis award winners. Over the last 2 years, Mendocino County has really done an incredible job at winning state fair awards in cannabis, and it was great to have engagement where people could come and celebrate them and meet those folks. And so we'll be sharing content about that, but I just want to appreciate Visit Mendocino's support and the county's support of our local cannabis industry and engaging broader communities to come and share an experience in our bounty with us. So thank you for that and look forward to more successes to report back. Take care.
Okay, very good. Any other public expression? So just looking to county council and the department, do we want to try to set a date for that next meeting at this point?
I think we're in concurrence that, yes, setting a date would be useful now. I'm just pulling up my own calendar, and does the committee want to do this as a special meeting or just ask staff to solicit further stakeholder input and report back to the committee?
Well, I think that was, the latter approach was what we were talking about. So I think that that would be the next step.
And that will certainly make scheduling a bit easier. Yeah, and Mr. Duncliffe and I are just speaking. The week of the 18th is looking the best for me. The week of the 11th has quite a few scheduling conflicts. We're thinking maybe Tuesday the 19th. And for the benefit of anyone on Zoom, we saw some thumbs up coming from the audience.
Okay, so we're looking at this next preliminary meeting on September 19th. And will stakeholders be notified through Canna Notes or some such way so we can get participation? Okay?
I'm participating in RC Economic Development workshop on that day.
Okay. It doesn't sound like we need to be there at that time.
Yeah, actually, I would suggest that you not be there unless we notice it as a special meeting. We can.
Well, that was the question. So is
Yeah.
it a special meeting or not?
Yeah.
And for
Yeah.
my schedule, I'm not available.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Very good with that. Okay, any further announcements? Item 3C. Seeing none? Okay, we will adjourn at 9:56. Very good. Well done, everyone.